Give me a minute and let's talk about Tagatarium's comment and question here. I heard that some Chinese officials had been arrested for corruption as some of their ballistic missiles were filled with water instead of propellant. What's happening in Russia? And this was a story that was reported, a couple months, maybe 2 months ago or so. Five generals inside of the Chinese Space Force equivalent, which is also responsible for the nuclear program, were arrested along with another four generals in the retired and active duty that were all accused of corruption. And in the reporting from China, in Mandarin, there is an idiom, to fill with water, which translates literally as to fill with water. But what it means is they were guilty of corruption. They were stealing, they were embezzling, malfeasance. Unfortunately, this Chinese idiom was translated literally, and all the mainstream media ran with it. And they reported that the missiles were filled with water. And I admit that I did the same thing. Everybody was saying it, right? It was only after Alex Hollings did some research into the translation of the original official statement from the Chinese government that we discovered that this was not accurate. And of course, it didn't make sense since these rockets use solid fuel. Those are solid fuel boosters, and they're not generally fueled until they're about to be fired. So it was confusing, and it goes to the heart of how difficult language is. I mean, not only do we have these expressions that to a native speaker are well known and everybody understands what it means, but to a non-native speaker, especially in an official press release, you take it at its word. And so the whole question there of the rockets being filled with water is nonsense. That's not what happened. What happened was the generals are accused of allegedly siphoning funds off into their own private accounts. Now, the question is, in the most corrupt nation on earth, Russia, where we see the effects of the cancerous corruption that is endemic across the boards in the failures of the equipment and machinery on the battlefield in Ukraine, and the complete failure of the Russians to bring any of their so-called modern weapons to the field of battle, like the T-14 Armada, which we haven't seen hide nor hair of, because it doesn't exist. That's why. In light of their failures and the clear corruption that has gutted the modern Russian army, can we assume that the 20% budget that the Russians have for the maintenance of their nuclear arsenal, most of which is Soviet and was inherited, right? They spend on the maintenance of their nuclear arsenal about 20% of what the United States spends on the maintenance of their nuclear arsenal. Now, let's assume that the Russians aren't stealing from that fund, that every one of those $1 of $5 that they have for maintenance and the maintenance budget has gone to the maintenance of those missiles. They don't have the money to keep them all working. And that's assuming that every one of those dollars goes to the maintenance of those missiles, which we know that is not likely. So when it comes to the Russian nuclear arsenal and all of this nuclear saber rattling that we hear from them, what is it about? Since very likely very few of their nukes actually work, and they know damn well that ours work. Why do they keep bringing this up? Because we're dumb. We don't understand Russia. And when the Ukraine conflict happened, all the politicians ran their mouths and gave the game away. Oh, we won't put troops on the ground, Mr. Putin. Oh, we won't consider any use of nuclear arms. Oh, we won't send tanks. We won't send long-range missiles. We'll tie the hands of the Ukrainians behind their backs and tell them they can't use the weapons we send on your territory. Right? We told them all of this. We gave them the restrictions that we would impose on ourselves. And so what do? They keep throwing our fears in our faces. That's what this is about. And Schultz put his fucking foot in his mouth this week, boy. There's a coalition of the willing evolving. France now, Estonia, Poland, Canada have all said boots on the ground are not off the table. And then Schultz had to go and run his mouth and say, oh, no German will ever be sent to Ukraine. He's doing it again. Doing it again. Stupidity of the worst sort. So to answer the question, there wasn't really water in the missiles, but 9 Chinese generals were arrested and charged with corruption. Is it likely that the same thing has been happening in Russia? It's likely. But even if it hasn't been, even if that tiny little maintenance budget actually all went to the maintenance, they don't have the money to maintain that stockpile adequately. They don't. And so it seems highly unlikely that the vast majority of Russian nukes won't just fizzle, especially because the main point of maintenance is the fissile triggers. You got to basically refresh them every 6 years if you want them to keep working. No way. On 6,000 weapons, no way in hell that that's been going on. So every time these Russians run their mouths about nuking the world, have a good laugh like I do, because it's a joke. The Russian nuclear arsenal is a pile of shit. Now, of course, if only 100 of them are in good shape, that's enough to do a lot of damage on the planet. But it will also mean the very end of Russia. So thanks for the question, man.